Good morning, everyone. So that awkward pause, we got to start the recording so y'all can check this out later. I was telling Robin, feels like a million years, and I promise it's not. Okay, before I turn the mic over to this amazing next panelist, I have a little bit of house cleaning. Is that what they call it? House cleaning. That's what they call it. So you might have noticed a lot of the panelists, and Robin especially, she is looking for interaction. All right. Thank you. So what that's going to look like, Robin's going to be in charge of the chat. So if you want to pop something in, immediate reactions, emojis, hearts, any of those awesome things, feel free. If you've got maybe a deeper question, maybe a more personal question, I'd encourage you to put that in the Q&A. I'm going to have my camera and mic off. When I see something pop up in the Q&A, I'm going to turn my camera back on. Y'all know I've seen your question. We will do our very best to get to all of them. If not, I will keep track of them and get them to Robin later. And so, speaking of Robin, I have met a lot of really amazing people in my last couple of years on my change management journey. Robin is one of my absolute favorites. She is one of the smartest, most outgoing, charismatic, and vulnerable people I have ever had the pleasure to meet. She's the only person who is doing 2 panels, if I'm not mistaken, and there is a reason for that. So I am going to stop talking. I'm going to turn it over to Robin. It is awesome to see you, Robin. Take it away.
Thank you, Jake. So first, let me introduce my skill set a little bit. I am Robin Rosine. I work for the Washington Department of Veterans Affairs as the Organizational Change Manager. I have some experience with Prosci. Not only do I use their concepts and I'm certified as a change practitioner, but I'm also an advanced instructor. I've spent several years learning Lean Six Sigma, the Toyota production way, total quality management, several different modalities for continuous improvement. And I've been a state worker for over 20 years. So hopefully all of this experience rounds out to some things you may already know, and I will be able to solidify that belief system for you and hopefully give you some new information that maybe you haven't thought of before. So today we're looking at diving into resistance, everybody's favorite subject. I chose kind of a beachy theme since we are diving into resistance. So hopefully you like that. The first thing that I'd like to do, though, is I'd like to really create a definition around what is resistance. It's so much easier to tell people to just get on board and do it, right? And if that was the case, I probably wouldn't have a job. Because what we find is that's actually much harder. I also think that the definition in front of us, refusal to accept or comply with the change, might be a little bit aggressive. Refusal, really? Wow. It probably is true and accurate, but managing resistance isn't a contact sport. We deal with resistance, whether changes are good or bad. We deal with resistance if people are involved in the change or if they're sitting on the sidelines eating popcorn, right? Hesitancy, yeah, Linda, that's a good word, right? A lot of times, even the behaviors that we observe around resistance aren't really all that aggressive. The next definition that I would like us to look at is the idea of what a resistance manager is. And I'll let you know that Cheryl has divulged to me that the title resistance manager really bugs her, right? But I'm going to ask you to do me a favor before I give you my belief systems. Can you put into chat what your definition of a resistance manager is. Not willing to change, someone who can work through the toughest parts of change, a hand holder, right? Someone who breaks down barriers, supporting employees, a cheerleader, spoon-fed, a listener and a supporter. So currently we have a little over 200 people participating in this particular session. And notice that every single person has their own definition of what a resistance manager is and how they can activate that, right? Some of those are, tongue-in-cheek negative, that spoon feeder, right? And some of them are really focused on the individual that they're working with. And yes, all of it's true. Is a resistance manager different than a change manager? Yes. So a resistance manager is an individual who is managing resistance with those impacted individuals. A change manager enables those resistance managers to do their job. So trying to remember that we are enablers of leaders. We can't be the ones to do all of the work. There are times where we will set up structures for resistance management, and I'll talk about that. But in reality, we should not be the ones who are managing that resistance. And like I said, I will get part of this presentation is about talking about that specifically. My definition of a resistance manager is a problem solver who helps determine the root cause of resistance and applies tactics to address that root cause. We're going to look at a few different types of resistance. We're going to look at what we can do about it. We're going to look at barriers that we find when we're trying to manage resistance, and also some things we can do about that. So active resistance are those sharks in the water. They're really vibrant. You can see them. You are quite aware automatically that that person is not on board. We see this in activities like they will flat out say they're not going to participate. They will tell you and everyone else why the change is wrong or it's ineffective. You may see that individuals sabotage the change at those drastic moments, or maybe they hoard information. So again, I'm going to ask you to enter something into the chat. What are behaviors that you notice when you are seeing that active resistance come to fruition? While you guys are doing that, is it being a resistance manager part of being a change manager? Yes, others in the project team will need to assess root cause and problem solving and best ways to manage it, but the OCM plays a pivotal role in actively managing the resistance as part of their change plan. And yes, I will be talking about the difference between managing change from our perspective as a change manager versus the enabling role. folded arms, unwillingness to engage, loudness in the room, all the negativity. When leadership says they're being transparent and actually aren't, yes. And yes, I love this. Samuel put in courage. Yes, sometimes active resistance is courage, and we will talk about that. Unwillingness to listen tells everyone why it won't work. Talking about why the old way is working just fine. Canceling meetings, pushing meetings out, arguing about the solution. Avoiding participation in change-related discussions. Okay, so I'd like you to scroll through this list because you are learning from each other, right? One of our jobs is to help individuals understand how to see resistance, right? It may not actually be a negative thing, and we're going to talk about that as well. But we have to be able to identify when resistance occurs. And with active resistance, that's really easy, right? But what do we do about these active resistors? Whoops. So one of the first things that we need to do is engage that executive sponsorship. There is nothing better than leaders engaging, and we can do that in a couple of ways. Sometimes we share information that we have. Hey, would you be willing to go talk to this person? You're going to be the preferred sender of any information they have to share, right? Sometimes it's about creating those talking points, knowing the resistance moments. So they're prepared to have a discussion around those items, or be able to point people to different resources. The next one is to talk a lot, which is my favorite thing in life to do. But thinking about this proactively, we know that there is anticipated resistance to any change. And hopefully, as we're building our change management strategies, this is one of the things that we're thinking about. We need to identify early what we already know may be subjects of resistance. What is our mitigation plan? Do we need to tackle that through our communication plan? What does that look like? And being able to provide FAQs when the questions do arise. And my favorite thing is direct confrontation of the issue. So if we have an individual exhibiting resistant behaviors, we may want to utilize training in crucial conversations to help us understand where that resistance is coming from. We also don't want to forget about our mid-level managers and our supervisors. So these are the individuals that staff want to hear from the most. And they are the least likely to receive any upskill in change management. They're there for operations. But part of operations is change. So in order to be able to really identify this resistance, we need to be connected to those mid-level managers and supervisors. We need to coach them on how to manage resistance. And again, this is that enabling role, right? You're enabling these individuals to manage resistance where it's starting, and hopefully before it becomes persistent resistance. And then if you have the ability, bring these people into your work. I don't call these people resistance managers at that point. I call them risk managers, because they're going to tell me every single reason why that particular project is not going to work, while the solution is not going to fit the organization. And now I have ammunition to really make sure that that solution is going to be successful, because I can make adjustments most of the time to their feedback. So now I got a question. When leadership already has their agenda and doesn't really care what anyone has to say because they are just pushing that agenda, isn't it futile at that point to continue to engage? Absolutely not. It is never futile to engage. And here's why. Even if someone has their direction lined up, they know exactly what they want, they know exactly how they want it. If you are able to develop the relationship when you are engaging executive sponsorship, you have the ability to continue to share that messaging. If you have the ability to continue to share that messaging, you may or may not change that leader's mind. But what you will get out of it is the answer to why not, so that you can share that in your communication. All right. So that was active resistance. With passive resistance, this can look like meetings after the meetings. It can look like inaction or not meeting timelines. Something along the lines of like, this is not my priority. So while I'm not saying, no, I'm not going to do it, it depends on if it fits in my scheduled work for the day or the week by the timeline. I've also seen at this point promoting the us versus them mentality. So I can identify this by hearing things like headquarters says, or the director says, right? Not taking ownership that they are part of that process, right? So again, I'm going to ask you to throw it in chat. We want observable behaviors of passive resistance. What have you experienced? Workarounds. Yes, not following through. Labor union usage. And that can actually go into either category, passive or active, depending, right? Missing meetings. I'll do it next week. Recruiting allies. Weaponizing incompetence. That's my favorite. Leaving a group meeting when a particular topic arises. You're like, I'm out. I've had fun. See ya. Not taking accountability. Complete silence in meetings. That's my favorite. I'm a person who really likes to interact. So if someone's silent, I usually call their name. Falling asleep during a meeting. I have seen that. Cracks me up every time. So what can we do about this? Again, we can talk a lot. But in this case, we might want to consider our honesty and our humility around the project. It's no longer about cheerleading. It's about understanding where their resistance is coming from and identifying if there are gaps that have already been worked on, or we're aware that we need to work on. having those conversations of reality can help those passive resistant individuals come on board a little bit easier. Again, we want to be able to use our passive resistors. We want to invite participation in solution design. We want to be able to have them be part of the process. And it's not necessarily going to kill resistance, but at least they have a place where their voice can be heard. And I strongly believe in using positive influence from other peers, from a change agent network, connecting with individuals who see the work from a different perspective and tying some support around those resistors. And then I don't know if you notice, but leadership is last on this one. Why do you think that leadership would be last for passive resistors? Distrust. You want to build the relationship. They're not in a state of openness. It can be embarrassing, saving face. It doesn't create safety. So is the solution to make the square peg fit into a pin-sized hole when leadership really isn't having it and they're just pushing their agenda at that point? I don't believe that change management is a square peg. I believe that some change management is better than no change management at all. So we do have to work in situations that maybe are not comfortable, where the changes are difficult. And I am happy to have conversations offline to help brainstorm ways of engaging those leaders. One of the things that I've done is simply said, here's my role. This is what I want to bring to you. Is this valuable? And would you like to make any adjustments? And I see Jake came on. Jake, do you have a question for me?
I do not, but I got a anonymous attendee who asks, how would you handle a control freak who just wants to control a situation because?
So what I do is I take on a helper persona. Like, absolutely, you're in control of this. How can I help you? How can I make this easier for you? How can I assist in any understanding? What is it that you need to participate, right? Why is this so important to you? Where is your passion? Right? So it's about the words and the language that I use more than it is a difference in process structure.
Oh, and AA has a follow-up. And if their response is, I have it.
Okay, well, let me know if you need me. I appreciate it. Understand this change is coming your way, and then inform the sponsor or the mid-level manager of what that response was, because they're probably managing a personnel issue at that point, and change managers aren't often. Sometimes they are HR consultants, which that's a whole different realm. But for instance, my office is not attached to a human resources office. So at that point, all right, well, it really is the responsibility of the leader to get you to come along.
Thank you, Robin.
So the reason why I think that enlisting leadership support is the last one on this list is because a lot of times the lowest level of conversation is easiest here. So individuals are looking for a reason to say yes. And if that's true, then bringing out the big guns with the director of the agency, if that's the sponsor for the change, is probably not going to develop the trust. It's not going to develop the relationship that you want to have with that individual to help them work through the resistance, right? So a lot of times it's just easier to work at that lowest level and have those conversations at the lowest level. So I'm using the small L when I talk about leadership here. It might be their direct supervisor. It might be a peer. It might be a project manager or a change manager. Someone who's helping to understand where that individual is coming from. There are some things you can do for everyone, regardless of the identification of passive or active resistance. You have to identify the behavior first and recognize that they are being resistant. But some things that you can do is engage with that resistant individual early and regularly. You can engage with the managers and supervisors that can wrap support around that employee. You can take a pause in your communication strategy and determine if you are just shooting out information so that people have awareness, or if you're being intentional about when and how you're communicating. Does every impacted group need the exact same information? In complex projects, probably not. In less complex projects, maybe it's true. But let's be intentional about what messaging needs to go to who. And then spend some time coaching those resistant individuals. What's going on with you? How can I help? Why are you resistant? Is there a reason why you don't want to come on board? Help me understand so that I can share your message and I can advocate for you. And sincerely listen to concerns. One of the hardest things that I've had to practice is listening without the intent of responding. So if I'm open and objective and I'm just taking information in, then the only thing that I'm doing at that moment is asking questions for clarification on their points. And if that's true, I will gain a larger understanding, which gives me something that I can work with. Can resistance help the outcome? What do you guys think? I got some yeses, potentially. And if the request for clarification is only met with non-answers, communication has to go both ways. Yeah, we only bring in, my rule of thumb is at the desire point, if I can get 80% of individuals to engage in the change, then I've done my job. I'm not going to get everybody to come around, and the ones who don't want to come around, it's usually a human resources issue, and I lean on my human resources office. Often I have some liaisons and partners there depending on what I'm working with. Hi, Jake.
Oh, hello again. I'm wondering if you actually saw this question or if this is just incredibly fortunate timing. Anonymous attendee, what is your sense of the balance between giving time and power to resistors versus those who are on the fence or who are ready to champion the change when the change work is so significant? And I can read that again if need be.
I've got it in front of me. Thank you.
Oh,
So it depends on the change. It depends on the change manager. And it depends on the individual who is resisting. So you can't approach everyone the same way. And some people need more than others, whether it's passive or active resistance, whether it's loud or silent. It really depends on the individual, because organizations don't change. Individuals change, and it usually happens one person at a time.
thank you, Robin.
You're welcome. And in a lot of ways, one of the things that I've noticed is that if I'm working through resistance with one person, that same subject of resistance is a resistance factor for others. So if I'm managing one individual, it may take away some of the other individuals because I was able to get their questions answered in different formats.
Oh, hello again.
Hi.
Linda Lancaster asks, what if the person resisting is silent and refuses to express their concern with anyone? I kind of came up in.
Yeah, and again, you really have to, communication is a two-way street. If an individual chooses not to engage, if you put your hand out and say, hey, I want to help you, I want to understand where you're coming from, I want to advocate for your belief systems, and they say, no, all right, well, I tried. So you can either engage with me and I can help you through this, or you are going to deal with the outcome of the solution. Those are your choices. And I'm okay with either choice.
Fair. Thank you, Robin.
Can it be said then that resistance can also be enacted by the sponsor? Yes. And if so, how would you resolve that? The same way I would resolve it with anyone else. I'd have a conversation. What's going on? Why do you think that way? Where is your passion coming from? And we're going to get into that a little bit more. But yes, I have had sponsors resist their own project. All right. So a lot of you had said that, yes, resistance can help the outcome. And here's when it can help. So when the root cause of resistance is identified early, then you're able to have a larger impact on the project outcome. If you are able to identify that root cause early, then you also have time to see if you can validate that resistance through data or investigation. So qualitative or quantitative, you're able to verify if the resistance is valid or not. And data really becomes your friend here. If there are past performance measures, if there is a way of tracking individual work, if there are process flows that are in place for current state, you will be able to verify that a lot easier. And then you can advocate that particular resistance for positive change. And then the last one is when resistant stakeholders are involved in project planning and execution. You're not going to get all of them. Not going to lie, you're not going to get all of them. But you're going to get a lot of individuals who want to participate in your change and can in various ways. So with resistance management, there are barriers to being a resistance manager, just like there's barriers to any role. There's also things we can do about it. And I'm going to start off with the barriers and then talk about some overarching actions that we can work through. So, for your barriers, you may have ineffective leadership. We've heard that a lot today. We've got, sponsors who aren't on board. We have people who they already have their solution. They're not taking any advice, or they're not listening, right? We have a lot of opportunity there. And what we see here with this barrier is leaders struggling to not own their roles while managing change. They might end up delegating responsibilities or not performing their roles during the change. And a lot of times this can cause a much bigger cultural issue. When leaders are uncommitted to the change, it can create inconsistent messaging to employees. This can foster rumors, misperceptions about the change, which is, and this all creates greater resistance over and over and over again. The next one is underestimating the magnitude of resistance. We may think that we have a good little idea, and we're trying to put that idea into motion. And maybe there's huge reasons why individuals might push against this, right? So some roadblocks that show up here are behaviors like we saw in active and passive resistance. We see people trying to flip those fence sitters. We may see that the foundation of the change starts eroding. We may hear belittling of the change rather than engaging in the solution. We might see that people silently opt out of the change even after verbal commitment. You have that blatant non-compliance and that protection of the old ways. And I see Jake. Hi.
Hey, Robin. Hope you're not regretting letting me pop in and out every now
No,
and
not at
again. Samuel Cook asks, is there a feedback loop somewhere that the resistance manager helps uncover that the change is a bad idea?
Well, I certainly agree. So I always, one of the things that I coach at WDVA is the creation of the two-way feedback loop, where everyone involved in the process actually uses their own data sheet to track their conversations. So if someone comes up with a resistant message, they then go out to find the answers if they don't already have it themselves. And there are times, yes, that we try to put solutions in place and it is not the best idea. I see that more at the program level than I do at agency level or enterprise level, just simply because at the agency level and the enterprise level, individuals have been able to conduct feasibility studies, different opportunities to really understand current state, so that they aren't making that wrong decision. But not all projects were actually a good idea and can create more problems than they solve. And, going back to that, if I can verify that resistance is valid through data or through investigation, then yes, those are conversations I would gladly have with the sponsor.
Thank you, Robin.
So the next one that we're looking at is those unsupportive managers, those middle managers. A lot of times we'll see middle managers, they will show an unwillingness to participate in the change or fulfill their roles in managing that change at the lowest level. A lot of times we see this because they just don't manage the resistance from their employees. They're like, oh, they'll be fine, without actually having the conversation and without truly managing. Ineffective leadership alignment with the change management team can look like expectation setting that frequently falls short. It results in not knowing everything about the future state of impacted groups. I also see this when leaders choose not to shift business metrics, those operational metrics, to accommodate for unknown impacts as the change is implemented. And this can drive employees to create workarounds for the change just so they can continue to meet those metrics. It really is okay as we move from knowledge to ability, from knowing to doing. It is okay to see a drop in production for a short time as employees are working through the new future state. And then lack of organizational readiness. We see this through past failures. These past failures create a bias, and employees start resisting trying to shape a new culture, a new future. A lot of times the change is misperceived as being worse than it actually is. We see rumors and sabotage become a cyclical process of distress and worry rooted around the change. And there's always this, back to those performance measures, that misperception that performance won't dip during transition, right? But what can we do about it? We can start earlier, not just the change management initiative, but the resistance management as well. We can start those activities earlier if we have time in the timeline, just saying. Sometimes there's capacity constraints. We might need more time to assess potential resistors, identify stakeholders, create buy-in, and maybe even create buy-in for change management as a discipline. Not all agencies have adopted change management as a way of doing business yet. We can enlist committed and competent sponsor support before the project begins. But what does that sponsor support look like? Sponsors really need to commit to understanding and agreeing on time and resource commitments. They need to complete buy-in on the results of the change. They need to understand their role in resistance mitigation. With engaging those middle level managers and supervisors, these roles can often be the most intense, loudest, and the most influential resistors to change. Start engaging this group early and help set the expectation that they are going to help manage resistance on their teams. For managers who do this, they need to be farther along in their change journey than their direct reports. So you can't give middle managers the same information as you're giving all staff at the same time, because they won't be ready for the questions. They won't be ready to support the change. They won't be ready to manage their own resistance before they engage in the change. And then we want to create a robust and structured resistance management plan. Plans for addressing resistance failed to match the amount or type of resistance in most cases where the project had failed. So here's my recommendation for elements that go into a plan. I identify impacted groups and stakeholders early, and I list all of the names, right? And that is a working document. I continue to update. I continue to work through it. I also create a training plan for managers and supervisors so that they are ready to address resistance. I assess potential resources for resistance. Talk to a sponsor coalition. I talk to individuals that I know are already going to be impacted by the change. I talk to the sponsors of the project. I have a lot of conversations about what that resistance could look like before I engage in trying to manage it. I gather change agents. WDVA has a fantastic change network moving forward right now. And these peer leaders really help lead the change. They provide a voice to me as the organizational change manager for those employees that I can't be in contact with all of the time. And they help me with the communication to ensure that I am reaching the right messaging at the right time. They also help me develop my change strategies, the change management plan. Like, this group is really involved in how we manage change in our organization. I also believe in obtaining executive buy-in to address the resistance. So ensuring they know all of the resistance, where even if the answer is no, we're not going to do anything different, being able to know why so that we can share that message. And then, I know this is a problem in state government, but look at resource allocation. Is one change manager enough? Do you need to develop a change network? Do you need to develop a steering committee with lesser players? What does that look like? What does your resourcing look like to support that change? And is it right-sized for your change? And then again, notice that communication is last. Again, I'm talk a lot, absolutely, and a communication plan is not the only element in change management. Communication should be consistent. It should be frequent, one-on-one when possible, and transparent. This is where we look at early and often, making sure that those messages are there. We want to make sure that people are hearing from their direct business owner. But don't let this be your only strategy. So that is the information that I have to share with you today. We have about 11 minutes left. I know that I missed questions in the chat because the chat was going so fast and the interaction with each other was amazing. So if I didn't hit on a question that you still have a desire to hear about, please feel free, put it in the chat. I'm open to taking any questions you may have. Thanks, Jess Gray. Are there specific tools that I use all the time? And if so, will you share? Yes, absolutely. So one of the tools that I talked about was a two-way feedback loop log. So I provide that to anyone who is sponsoring any type of change. I give them a template, and in that template, they're able to identify, the person, what the message was, what was the general feeling, was it positive, negative, was it solution oriented, like what does that look like, what's that general feeling, and then also like what did you do about it, do you have a status of or what actions you need to take, and then what was that final outcome, what's that final answer, and that can really help me build those FAQs really well. And I see Jake popped up.
Yeah, we have 3 questions and possibly counting coming up in Q&A.
Okay.
Let's see what we can do. Question number 1 from Samuel Cook. Is there any kind of discussion around language for terms like lower levels?
Yes, there are. And I'm not going to lie, this is my vulnerable moment. I come from I'm like the old school generation now. I'm just newly realizing this. And so sometimes language change can take a while. So yeah, I try to use language like frontline staff and leaders. And I use the term leaders loosely because a lot of frontline staff are leaders, right? I will call out roles instead of upper or lower managers. I try, and I am beyond not perfect.
Thank you so much. Anonymous attendee, if there is resistance to change management, for example, they'll have to learn either way, where would you start?
So I have a wonderful slide deck that I use specifically around the value of change management. If I feel that that's an issue with a sponsor, I sit down with that slide deck and one-on-one and in person. Pardon me, my cat just walked across my table. So I will have that conversation one-on-one and in person. I will open up my laptop so that they can see the slide deck, and we will have a conversation so that they can ask for clarity. And so I can build this understanding that change management really can be their friend, and it's not an extra thing. It's built into their plans. It's not another plan outside of what they're trying to accomplish.
Love that term of not an extra thing. Like, just that is awesome. Okay, one more. What's your best guidance for influencing leadership to better support change management? For example, to identify and enable change champions, that kind of thing.
So the first thing I do is go where the energy is. Not all leaders are going to understand or enjoy this idea of change management. Change management can be messy, right? And so a lot of times I just look for where the energy is in the beginning. I have at WDVA, we have 4 skilled nursing facilities. If you're a veteran or you know someone who is getting towards those later stages in life, you might want to research that. They're amazing. But the leaders of those 4 homes, when I first came into WDVA, had very different outlooks about what change management would or could do for them. And I had one individual who was like really interested in sucking up about as much knowledge as that individual could. And I put it to work with him.
Mm.
And when I did that, other people, some of those other leaders started asking questions and started really considering, you know, okay, well, this piece might work for me. Well, this piece, well, now I need to talk to Robin because now I feel like I need a structure, right? So a lot of times it's classic psychological manipulation, but only use that power for good.
We are at 11:56, Robin.
Are we really? Wow, that's amazing. That was the fastest hour I've ever experienced. So if no one has any other questions, I will bid you adieu. Thank you so much for joining the conference, and thank you for joining this session. I know that it's a really hard subject, and hopefully this helped you think through your own processes at your own organizations.
It's awesome to see you, Robin. Thank you so much.
Thank you.